Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the fascinating modern-day afterlife of an absolute software legend. We're talking about Windows 7. Nearly 2 decades after its launch, die-hard fans are still incredibly passionate and, frankly, just clinging to this operating system. But why exactly is that? Well, today we're going to look closely at the data, the history, and the harsh realities to figure out exactly where this powerhouse stands today and whether it really has any logical place left in our modern world. You know that serene, blue, glowing desktop interface? The little bird perched on a delicate branch, the light rays filtering softly through the iconic Windows logo? It instantly brings back a massive flood of computing memories, doesn't it? For millions of people across the globe, this specific imagery is just permanently etched into their minds. It really serves as a powerful visual anchor to a much simpler, highly formative time in our collective digital history. But all this intense nostalgia, it actually poses a really fascinating mystery for our explainer today. As we sit here looking toward 2026, is there any logical reason to actually boot up and use a 17-year-old operating system? Are people doing this just for the warm memories, or maybe to run that one stubborn piece of old hardware? Or, against all odds, is there genuine practical utility left in this aging code? To answer that question properly, let's rewind back to its golden age. Released to the world in October 2009, Windows 7 arrived with a massive, almost impossible burden on its shoulders. It absolutely had to fix the widely criticized, resource-heavy flaws of its direct predecessor, Windows Vista. And you know what? It succeeded brilliantly. It was significantly leaner, noticeably faster, and almost overnight, it became one of the most rock-solid and universally beloved operating systems in tech history. A huge part of that lasting appeal was its beautifully designed Aero glass interface. It felt incredibly premium at the time. You had these visually striking, transparent window borders, incredibly smooth graphical animations, and it introduced snappy usability tricks we now completely take for granted. I'm talking about things like Aero Peek to quickly see your desktop, Aero Snap for effortless window management, and of course Aero Shake to instantly clear away all the visual clutter with just a quick flick of the wrist. But hey, it wasn't just a pretty face. Under the hood, Windows 7 was optimized flawlessly. It ran incredibly fast with remarkably low RAM usage, often requiring just 2 to 4 gigabytes of memory to function perfectly. Because of this incredibly lightweight digital footprint, older laptops and legacy hardware that would instantly choke and stutter on a modern operating system, well, they still hum beautifully when running Windows 7 today. And when you compare that streamlined, focused experience to the deeply cluttered reality of our modern systems, the contrast is staggering. Windows 7 gave you a classic, predictable start menu, straightforward local file management, and crucially, a total lack of built-in advertising. In today's overwhelming era of constant AI notifications, algorithmic taskbars, and aggressively forced cloud integrations, the perfectly quiet, predictable environment of Windows 7 feels like a massive, much-needed breath of fresh air. This quiet stability feeds directly into one of the major reasons Windows 7 fiercely survives today. It is literally the ultimate dedicated retro gaming machine. It natively hosts legendary built-in games that modern operating systems largely left behind or buried under paywalls. We're talking about the incredibly vibrant classic Solitaire sitting right alongside the fully 3D, beautifully rendered Chess Titans board. These games weren't just idle time killers. They were digital comfort food. Firing up the Games Explorer to find Purple Place, Free Cell, or Minesweeper was a beloved daily ritual for millions of office workers and students alike. To an entire generation of computer users, these specific game icons are just as recognizable and honestly, just as cherished as the iconic Windows startup sound itself. And what's often forgotten in a wave of nostalgia is that these titles offered surprising educational benefits. They were subtly helping users develop real-world skills. You learned numerical logic and high-stakes deduction through Minesweeper. You practiced careful strategic planning and resource management while balancing budgets in SimCity 4. And you nurtured boundless creativity and architectural planning in The Sims 3, which, by the way, ran like an absolute dream on this operating system. But the platform's legacy goes way beyond those beloved built-in titles. Thanks to its stellar, rock-solid support for DirectX 9, 10, and 11, Windows 7 was the foundational bedrock for some of the most massive, era-defining hits in all of gaming history. Mega franchises and industry shakers like Minecraft, Portal 2, and The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim all launched during Windows 7's absolute prime, permanently shaping an entire generation of PC gamers. If you want to experience the raw, original magic of those games exactly as they were first played, this operating system is arguably their most authentic home. Looking back at the release timelines of industry titans like Minecraft and Skyrim, it's truly amazing to realize that countless players took their very first steps into these vast, blocky landscapes or sprawling fantasy worlds just clicking away on a trusty Windows 7 machine. The reason it was the perfect gaming companion basically comes down to raw system resources. The incredibly stable environment of Windows 7, combined with far fewer background telemetry processes than we have today, meant that all of your hardware's power could be dedicated to what actually mattered, your game. Whether you were conquering the mind-bending, physics-based puzzles of Portal 2 or running heavily demanding legacy software, the operating system simply stayed out of your way. Okay, but here comes the harsh reality check of this explainer. Time inevitably catches up with all software. After its triumphant release in 2009, the clock immediately started ticking. Microsoft officially ended mainstream support in January 2020, and finally, after years of expensive life support for enterprise users, they cut the cord entirely on the Extended Security Updates program back in January 2023. The safety net is entirely gone. Which brings us to a terrifying bottom-line fact for any modern internet user. Today, Windows 7 receives absolutely zero new security patches from Microsoft. Period. None. If a devastating new system vulnerability, advanced ransomware, or a massive zero-day exploit is discovered tomorrow morning, it will remain completely unpatched forever. Surfing the modern web on this outdated operating system leaves your machine dangerously exposed to severe cyber attacks. And compounding this extreme security danger is a rapidly shrinking modern ecosystem. It's not just Microsoft abandoning ship. The entire tech world has definitively moved on. Modern game launchers like Steam simply refuse to run. New hardware drivers for modern graphics cards and processors, they don't exist for it anymore. And even the last few legacy lifelines, like Mozilla's Firefox Extended Support browser, are nearing their absolute end. The modern web is aggressively closing its doors on Windows 7. So how do we correctly evaluate its place in 2026? Well, it requires a very strict set of rules. You should absolutely boot it up if your exclusive goal is to play classic PC games offline, run highly specialized legacy hardware that simply cannot be replaced, or just to preserve historical software. But it is a hard, non-negotiable no. Seriously, stay far, far away. If you are doing online banking, handling any sensitive personal data, or relying on modern connected internet applications. When we tally up the final scores based on all the available data, it paints a very clear, heavily polarized picture. Windows 7 still utterly dominates in categories like pure nostalgia, clean user aesthetics, and snappy performance on older PCs, easily earning a solid 4 out of 5 overall from retro enthusiasts. But it fails spectacularly where it matters most today, suffering a dismal 1-star rating for modern security and web compatibility. Therefore, the absolute smartest workaround for enthusiasts today is isolation. You should absolutely use a modern, fully patched operating system, like Windows 11 or Linux, as your primary daily driver connected to the internet. Then, you safely quarantine your beloved Windows 7, run it entirely offline on a dedicated retro hardware rig, or spin it up safely inside a secure virtual machine on your modern desktop. That way, you get to completely enjoy the past without compromising your present security. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought. The next time you feel that powerful wave of nostalgia and the undeniable urge to boot up a classic, unsupported system, pause and ask yourself, are you thoughtfully preserving computing history, or are you just carelessly risking your personal data? The choice is entirely yours. Thank you so much for joining me, and keep exploring.